everyone. Welcome to Anastasis Academy. My name is Ananya B. Chatterjee, and we are back with the second episode of Maverick Mastery CAT 2024 series, wherein we take up the most anticipated question types for the VARC section, and we go through an in-depth analysis of the questions, the approaches, the elimination technique, so on and so forth. So guys, today's agenda is pretty simple. We are looking at some moderate to difficult level summary type questions. Those of you who have already taken CAT once would know that summary type questions are a constant feature in CAT exam, VARC section. At least 2 questions from this domain comes in CAT. So let us start with the question. So directions are pretty simple. Each passage given is followed by 4 summaries. Choose the option that best captures the author's position. Now, summary type questions rely heavily on our ability to understand the passage to start with. Only when we can comprehend the passage will we be able to zero in on the correct summary, right? So let's get started with the first question. The passage says, it's easy to poke fun at prissy parental responses, but take a closer look at Dahl's writing for children and you will find something to offend almost everyone. Prissy also means too proper. For example, parents telling us, okay, don't sit like that, sit like this. That's how a lady should sit like, don't laugh too loud. Something like that, you know. So too proper, prim and proper. You should not read this, you should not read that. So yes, we can make fun of those parents who are pretty apprehensive and vocally so about children, their children reading Roald Dahl's writing. It's a very well-known author for children. But if you take a closer look at Dahl's way of writing, you will realize that he is pretty offensive. It's pretty offensive, and parents are not entirely incorrect in being prissy about it. I would have a problem if my child reads things that are offensive like that. If he was a bigot is extremist, biased. He was an equal opportunities bigot. What does this sentence mean? अगर वो बिगट था तो he was an equal opportunities bigot. तो वो feminists को भी criticize कर रहा है और misogynists को भी criticize करता है. वो leftist लोगों को भी criticize करता है, वो right wing politicians को भी criticize करता है. Equal opportunities bigot, right? Teachers tend to be now we are talking about what kind of things you can observe in his writing that can be considered offensive. Teachers tend to be villainous. Even when benign matlab harmless. So ya to the teachers are pretty villainous, wicked. If they're harmless in his stories, they fail to impart any real wisdom. They are not good teachers. Either villainous or useless. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, one of the most well-known written works of Roald Dahl. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory's Oompa Loompa characters were originally depicted as small black pygmies with warlike cry, like that. That can be very offensive, racially speaking. You know, A, you are making fun of dwarf people. B, you are making fun of tribes who have a certain tonality to their language. Right. Female characters tend to be either warm or wicked with nothing in between. So either female characters are all Tulsi-like or they are very wicked and very, Kamalika types. No grayscales. Right. While revolting rhymes brands Cinderella's story everybody knows. The fairy tale girl next door a dirty slut. Now, I hope you understand that a parent might have issues with his or her child reading about Cinderella and in the same context reading the term dirty slut. So that's the problem. Okay. A says the formal responses of parents to Dahl's writing for children are absurd as they do not take into account that he was fair in being offensive to almost everyone. It is like we're justifying that, he was so nice and so level-headed, not partial. He insulted everyone. Just because a person is insulting everyone doesn't mean it's right. Not insulting is an option. And also, the responses were not formal, they were prissy, too proper. D says, for a writer who wrote for children, one second. Dahl was surprisingly offensive, extremist, and crude in his depiction of various characters. True. Let us keep this in the parking lot. But not being able to capture the entire idea because the parent part is not there. Let us see if we have any better option. Dahl's real personality of an unrelenting bigot was masked behind his eloquence as a writer for children. Could be, but the masking was not that effective. His offense was pretty conspicuous. His offense was pretty visible. Not like he was hiding behind it. You had to take a closer look. But B is saying the prudish actually means prissy, especially in the sexual context. Responses of parents to Dahl's writing may seem laughable. Laughable, yes, it is easy to poke fun, but are not without basis. As his writing, particularly the way he depicted some characters, which will include Oompa Loompas, teachers, and women, and Cinderella, which was offensive to almost everyone, an equal opportunity bigot. So between B and D, so A and C I eliminated because the data was distorted. It was not formal responses, and it could not be masked behind his eloquence. It was very obvious. But between B and D, I have sufficient data in the passage, but B has the lion's share, the bigger share of information given. So, because B is capturing more scope of the passage, B would be the correct answer. B will be the correct answer. You understand? So, data distortion, elimination, and lion's share for selection. Let's try the next one. Shamsuddin Muhammad Hafiz is one of the most beloved poets of the Persians and is considered by many from different cultures to be one of the 7 literary wonders of the world. Ralph Waldo Emerson and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe both agreed. As Emerson said of Hafiz, he fears nothing, he sees too far, he sees throughout. Such is the only man I wish to see or be. And Emerson gave Hafiz that grand famous compliment. Hafiz is the poet for poets. So we normal mango people, we go for poetry to poets. Poets, when they want to look for poetry, they go to Hafiz. Beautiful compliment given by Emerson to Hafiz. Hafiz's poems were also admired by such diverse notables as Nietzsche, the famous philosopher, Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, whose wonderful character Sherlock often quotes Hafiz. Garcia Lorca, even if you don't know, praised the Sufi poet. Johannes Brahms was so touched by his verse that he used several in his compositions. So we can see here that Emerson, von Goethe, then Nietzsche, philosopher, then Arthur Conan Doyle, then Garcia Lorca, then Johannes Brahms. So you have music, people from poetry, people from the literary section praising the genius of Hafiz. And even Queen Victoria was said to have consulted Hafiz in times of need. So not just the notables in the artistic domain. It was also Queen Victoria herself who would consult Hafiz in times of need, right? Although Hafiz must have been long dead by the time Queen Victoria was in power, I think. Consulted Hafiz means reading Hafiz's work. Anyway, Hafiz was a poet not only much loved by the Persians, but also hugely admired by eminent artists from different cultures. That's one. Hafiz was a much admired Persian poet whose advice was sought by even Queen Victoria. Hafiz was a poet with a great foresight and imagination, much admired by the elite and masses. Hafiz was considered to be one of the 7 literary wonders of the world. Now, let me show you how a process of elimination can help you get to the right answer. So, the only factual distortion that I see here is elite and masses. There is no data supporting this. I'll tell you why. Great foresight, I have data. Sees too far, sees throughout. Foresight and imagination. But when you say elite and masses, you are talking about two classes, socio-economic classes. You don't have the distinction here. You have a general word Persians. Now, I can't say man and woman because they are Persians. I can't say poor and rich because they are Persians. I can't say, I don't know, old and young because they are Persians. No. So elite and masses, I don't have data for that. And the people that you see here, the names, Emerson, Von Gogh, Nietzsche, Conan Doyle, Garcia Lorca, these are clearly, even if I do not know about them, if they are writing compositions, and if they are writing books and characters, it is understandable. We can infer that we are talking about artists, and artists are not always elites. They can be very poor also. Case in point, Vincent van Gogh died a very poor person. So was Picasso. Not elites. So anyway, so C is gone because it is distorting the data. Now it is important to understand that something which is not supported by the passage cannot be a part of your summary, if that makes sense. Can't add information like that. I am going to remove D because it is a secondary idea. Word by word, it is written. 7 literary wonders of the world. But it's not capturing the entire essence of it. The theme is how Hafiz was accepted and praised by so many people from the art fraternity and Queen Victoria. Now, I have to choose between A and B. Now, I have to go with lion's share. I need to go with lion's share. Now, at one side, when I say eminent artists from different culture and diverse notables, I have who all? R.W. Emerson, I have. Okay. I have Goethe, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. By the way, von Goethe was the visionary literati who initiated the Gothic movement in architecture and literature. Dracula, Transylvania, Frankenstein, all inspired by Goethe's way of looking at things. Then I have Emerson, I have Goethe, I have Nietzsche, the philosopher. Then I have Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. Then I have Garcia Lorca. Then I have Johannes Brahms, the great musician. So on one hand, option A is capturing all of them through the phrase eminent artists from different cultures. And option B is capturing Queen Victoria. It is anybody's guess now. It is anybody's guess which one has the lion's share. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 versus 1. A has more data or covers more scope of the passage as compared to B. So A would do more justice as a summary compared to B. Yes, A will be the correct answer. A will be the correct answer here. Okay, the third question. Linguistic chauvinism. Now, chauvinism is an old school way of looking at things. Like we say, male chauvinism. What does it mean? It means that because India has been known to be a pretty much patriarchal society for the better part of the history, people who are still wanting to perpetuate that sense of control on women and want to keep on going with the status quo, those people are called male chauvinists. That you can't just accept that women also have rights. That's not okay. Yeah. Linguistic chauvinism, as in old school perspective about language, very rigid ideas about language, now modernized and globalized, is a powerful force contributing to the mass disappearance of languages and culture. An extinction event with fundamental and incalculable political ramifications. Ramification means consequences, effects, consequences or effects. So, linguistic chauvinism, now modernized and globalized. So, chauvinism is basically when you are, like I said, you have a very rigid and old school way of looking at things, not going to change. So, that kind of an attitude is contributing towards mass extinction of what? Languages and cultures. How? Let me give you an example. Today, in the 21st century, sitting in India, we see that thanks to the British colonial hangover or whatever, no matter how nicely I know my own mother tongue, I cannot survive in this big bad world without English, especially the corporate world. That ideology, that fixation to English is making other languages irrelevant and redundant. Of course, it will have a cultural effect also. For example, I will be honest with you, I pride myself on my English. Right? I studied English. I studied English as a part of my college studies and graduation and so on. I can tell you a lot about Shakespeare, but I might not be able to tell you so much about Michael Madhusudan Dutt, the famous Bengali poet. I can tell you a lot about the Tudor history of England, but I might not know or in such detail the history and the cultural nuances of my own beginnings, the Bengali culture. I'm a Bengali. So that's happening. Bengali, one of the prime languages of India, let alone the lesser known languages. Let's talk about them. And this will have political ramifications because understand this. Do we see, so we see a lot of people, Tamil speaking people, Telugu speaking people, Bengali, Marathi speaking people in the parliament. Do we see similar representation of people from lesser known languages, from tribes in the northeast or Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh, those tribes, their own languages? Do we see that kind of representation? Corollary is, do we also understand that when me, a Bengali raised in Kolkata and Delhi, I get a certain political opportunity and I try to go and govern the lives of people in living in a tribe in the forests in Chhattisgarh, it might have a bad effect. I mean, just ideating on what the author says. So I'm going to read this sentence one more time. Linguistic chauvinism, now modernized and globalized, is a powerful force contributing to the mass disappearance of languages and cultures, an extinction event with fundamental and incalculable political effects. Up to half of all living human languages, mostly those that are undocumented, unwritten, and unknown outside their communities, mean, there are many languages that are not documented, that don't have their own scripts. Can be expected to disappear over the next century. Just imagine. Things that came into being in hundreds or maybe thousands of years would be extinct in the next 1 century. Leftists and liberals have recognized the role of global capital and its boundless growth imperative, as well as our own complicity as consumers. What does it mean? So, leftists and liberals have understood the role of global capital, you know, capital in terms of manpower, money, this, that, and its boundless growth imperative. Like, as in the possibilities, limitless possibilities of growing, as well as our own complicity as consumers, complicity, obedience as consumers. In the sixth mass extinction of biological life forms, guys, you will be stunned to know that every minute, so many species of flora and fauna are becoming extinct from the face of this world, never to come back again. So, the sixth mass extinction of biological life forms is happening. And people have recognized it, leftists and liberals. Now we're talking about life forms. Earlier we were talking about languages. So why is there more ambivalence? Ambivalence is dichotomy, confusion about, or simply less awareness of a linguistic and cultural emergency, equally bound up in centuries of capitalism, imperialism, and nation building. Capitalism is Punjivad, imperialism is Samrajyavad, and nation building is Rashtravad. Yeah. So the author is asking a question that if we are at least aware of the extinction of biological life forms and what it does to the planet, why are we choosing to ignore, or why are we choosing to be less aware about the ramifications of a cultural emergency and extinction of cultures and languages? The author asks. You can get, see, I'll tell you what. And the author says that both the extinction events have something to do with capitalism, imperialism, and nation building. I'll give you the example of language. Capitalism. So I'll give you an example of capitalism. So I am a person from a certain village in Birbhum district, Bengal. I have my own language, which is a lot different from the Bengali that is spoken in Kolkata. But because of capitalist forces, I will not find jobs in my own locality. I'm going to move to Kolkata for a job, make a family there, have kids there. My kids will never learn the ways and the way of life, the culture of Birbhum. My kids, because of a capitalistic uh, way of life, would be raised in Kolkata, in a metropolitan city, with the values that are not mine. So capitalism changes cultures and languages. My kid will not learn the Santhali language that I grew up speaking. Imperialism, biggest example, English again. Our neighbor China. So in today's world, if you have to go if you want to study a certain something in a management college or anything, you have to give a test in English first. In English, why? Had the situation been the same, had the British had not colonized us for 200 years, because China is not taking these entrance examinations in English in most cases. Nation building. Oh, this is such a good example I have of this. Linguistic chauvinism, how it operates under the garb of nation building. So okay, so I would not want to name the YouTuber, but I was watching a video a couple of days ago, and it said that there's a beautiful discourse happening between two people in Hindi. So one of the viewers commented that I speak Kannada and I am not very comfortable with Hindi. Could you also make a video in English? Subtitles don't give the same feel. And suddenly other people jumped at him that, oh my God, you're an Indian. Why don't you know Hindi? This and that. You're an anti-national, blah, 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 blah. Why, man? Do you know Telugu? Do you know Malayalam? Do you know Bengali? Do you know Marathi? Do you know any language from Northeast? Or maybe Kashmiri? Gujarati? If you are not speaking those languages, why are those people expected to speak in Hindi or understand Hindi and so on and so forth? Whatever has been their social environment, they've learned that only. Yeah. So in the name of nation building also, now Hindi, like everybody has to speak Hindi because Hindi is this, Hindi is that. Other languages are not given preference. That's bad. Anyway, coming to the questions. The alarming process and consequences of the current and impending mass disappearance of language and cultures with fundamental and incalculable political ramification is surprisingly not as much in focus as it deserves to be. Okay. Up to half of all living human languages, mostly those that are undocumented, unwritten, and unknown outside their communities, can be expected to disappear over the next century. Now, this is true. But is a secondary idea, verbatim, word by word. It's not even talking about the ramifications or so on and so forth. Linguistic chauvinism, now modernized and globalized, is a powerful force contributing to the mass disappearance of language and cultures, an extinction event with fundamental, again, very nice, good option. But secondary, first line. How would now say now? This C option is only talking about the language part of it, right? Linguistic chauvinism is as big a concern as the role of global capital. No, as big a concern as the role of global capital, blah, blah, blah. No. Concern could be compared to the mass extinction of biological life forms, not the role of global capital, boundless, blah, blah. So they're playing with your mind here. The importance of both extinction events can be compared, but one extinction event cannot be compared to the factor in the other. So because these three are problematic, A will make the most sense because it is talking about the alarming process and consequences, ramification, processes here, current and impending, disappearance of language and cultures, fundamental and incalculable political ramification. Surprisingly, not as much in focus as it deserves to be. This part is important, na? Huh? Why is there more ambivalence about? So A is the correct answer. A very difficult question it was. Directly after and consequent to the First World War, the self-help manual market exploded, presumably because everybody in Europe was dead or traumatized. Self-help books, as you know, are books that help you get motivated, that help you create a course of action for your problems, so on and so forth. But because of the aftermath of the First World War, people were dead or traumatized, and hence self-help book became prolific. It had become a world of Dick Heldars, maybe an author. As worry began to appear on the bookshelves, people were worried and they wanted to read about worry. It was ironically clear that it was here to stay. Why ironically? Because if people are reading it, why should they be worried anymore? And why should other people be worried enough to buy it? If self-help books worked to banish worry, eradicate or banish worry, one generation of them should have been enough. इस generation का हो गया है कल्याण, अगले generation से कोई worry नहीं है. Take William S. Sadler's Worry and Nervousness or the Science of Self-Mastery, an early and little remembered self-help volume. Sadler defines chronic fear, that is worry, as a purely psychic condition characterized by the inability to relax the attention when it has once fastened itself on a given idea, usually a persistently entertained fear of some sort. What is the author saying? That what is chronic fear? When your mind is fixated on a fear and is not being able to distract and go to another thought. You're fixated on what will happen, like that, right? Strangely paradoxical stuff and not very helpful either. Paradoxical, why? Because contradictory. Because if you're fixated on it and you've just explained it, what are you going to do on it? I'm not even going to listen to what you are saying. Na? I'm going to be fixated on my fear only, like you defined. Rather than offering practical strategies, Sadler seemed to think that if one could understand what ailed you, what plagued you, what made you suffer, you might find relief. As if understanding it would make it better. It doesn't happen with ailments, I think. Just understanding cancer doesn't cure the cancer. Anyway, self-help manuals were rarely useful, as can be seen from the several that flooded the bookshelves across the world after the first one. Rarely useful is okay. Yahan tak that was correct. This was one part of it. Several that flooded the bookshelves across the World War after the First World War. Across the world after the First World War. Why not? Because it's not talking about how it failed to address the concept of worry, which was a running theme in the passage. Self-help books are rarely useful as they focus on ailment rather than the cure. I think it can be said about Sadler, not everyone in general. As worry began to appear on the bookshelves after the First World War, it was ironically clear that it was here to stay. Maybe, but it doesn't talk about the authors. So B would be the correct answer. Takes into account the self-help manual market also, right? Europe also. Trauma of the First World War. So this part is covered. Books, names of books, nervousness, signs of self-mastery, little practical use, later said, in eradicating worry. Not very helpful in eradicating worry. So B is able to capture the essence of the passage in the most meaningful manner possible. Lion's share. All right. Modern bourgeois society, said Nietzsche, was decadent and enfeebled. Decadent isn't very indulgent, deeply seeped in sensual pleasures and so on and so forth. And enfeebled as in weak. One second. A victim of the excessive development of the rational faculties at the expense of will and instinct. So Nietzsche said that the modern middle class society, bourgeois society, bourgeois means middle class. Apologies for the background noise. The canines in my locality are having a very animated meeting among themselves. Was decadent and enfeebled. Okay, so middle class society is full of indulgences, full of pleasure seeking behavior, and weak. The middle class society is a victim of excessive development of intellect at the expense of willpower and instinct. So people are not giving attention to will, people are not giving attention to instinct. Against the liberal rationalist stress on intellect, Nietzsche urged recognition of the dark, mysterious world of instinctual desires, that don't intellectualize so much. ये करेंगे तो वो होगा, वो करेंगे तो ये होगा, ऐसा नहीं. Recognize the dark, mysterious world of instinctual desires, what you really want to do. The true forces of life. Smother the will, smother as in kill. Smother the will with excessive intellectualizing, and you destroy the spontaneity. Spontaneity as in quick actions, thought, action. Destroy the spontaneity that sparks cultural creativity and ignites a zest for living. Energy, enthusiasm for living. You're in the under the garb of practicality, you are overthinking everything. The critical and theoretical outlook destroyed the creative instincts. For a man's manifold potential to be realized, he must forego relying on the intellect and nurture again the instinctual roots of human existence. That's Nietzsche's thought. If you want to achieve your potential, you have to let go of intellect so much. A says Nietzsche urged the decadent and enfeebled modern society to forego intellect and give importance to creative instincts. So, first of all, the urge that Nietzsche had was not directly addressed to the society. So, A and B are gone. He just said, urged. Who? Not sure, according to the passage. Could be the people who are not so engrossed, they can make a difference. They're world leaders. We can't. Nietzsche criticizes the intellectuals. No, he does not criticize the intellectuals. He criticizes the process of intellectualization. Nietzsche blames excessive intellectualization for the decline of modern society and suggests nurturing creative instincts instead. So A and B gone, not supported by the passage. C gone, not supported by the passage. D is what is supported by the passage and is the correct answer and hence the best summary in this context. So guys, these were 5 passages that we covered. Let me give you some practice questions. You can pause and attempt the question. Practice question number 1. Practice question number 2. Practice question number 3. Practice question number 4. And finally, practice question number 5. These are very good questions. Try to reason out with factual distortion and lion's share. Focus on the understanding of the passage itself, then go by elimination to reach the correct summary. The answers of these 5 questions would be shared in the description box. So that's it for today. I will meet you in the next episode and be good. Happy learning. Keep working on your verbal ability and reading comprehension section. Thank you very much. See you again.